You're watching Co-op for Two, broadcasting live from Champaign, Illinois, Monday, August 22nd, 2022 at around 11 p.m. The channel could let me know if the audio and video is okay. Today we are continuing our playthrough of the Murders by Mail game, Sherlock Holmes Fellowship of Bones. This is turn 7. I've got the new reply in the mail that we're going to read. Let's just catch up a bit, talk about what's going on, what we've got planned, and then we'll jump into today's game. So the first thing to remind you is that at 1 a.m. in 2 hours from now, we'll be playing the LA Noire play-by-mail game, Bloom in Hollywood, or Hollywood Bloom. So if you're interested in that case, you can stick around for that. This is not the first video to watch if you haven't watched the previous ones. They're all fairly short, about an hour each. So if you haven't seen those, you could stop here and watch this after you've caught up. Anything else to talk about to catch up on? I'll just give you some background information on what I've been doing, and I think maybe time for a channel update video soon. So I don't know, like, what do the pros do? Do they hold off telling stories until their video updates? Jonathan, let's just check in with the chat. Jonathan said he picked up Mafia 2, which is one of my favorite video games, and I do remember he's talking about the winter setting in the beginning. The voice acting and the story of Mafia 2 is so good. It feels like you're in a Mafia movie. Matt E says, my wife and I just watched Kiss of Death. I don't know if I know Kiss of Death. Sure sounds like a noir movie, but I don't know if I know it. And I don't know who Victor Mature is. Sounds like a stage name of some sort. I did watch the Game of Thrones prequel, first episode. Didn't love it, even though it has one of my favorite actors ever, Paddy Considine, who was in 2 of my favorite movies. Well, one favorite movie called Cry of the Night Owl, which is a remake of an old French noir movie. Cry of the Night Owl is quite special. I would recommend it. And it's got a little new wave-esque... Well, I shouldn't say it. I can't spoil these things. People don't like spoilers. The original I didn't love, but the new one I like. And he was also in a trilogy of made-for-TV movies that I've recommended before, called... This is like a little test. This is how we find out how good my detective skills are going to be for the day. When I can't recall things, that's a bad sign. What's the trilogy of dark British cop serial killer movies? It's Red Riding. That's right. Red Riding, 1974, 1982, etc. There's 3 of them. So Paddy Considine is in the first one, I believe, and is amazing in it. So Red Riding, that's right. All right. What else do we need to talk about? I've been at work programming the OBS extension that I discussed the idea for on the stream a couple of times, where, if you'll remember, when we play Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, I frequently read information, and based on watching Paul Grogan on Gaming Rules channel, I saw that he would hide the paragraphs not being read on the channel by doing something like this with some white piece of paper. I have them. That's what we do. So in that case, I go into a close-up, and then I cover up the paragraphs we don't read. And then we were recently playing Cartaventura last week, a sort of card-driven adventure game that was surprisingly engaging. And I just bought a copy for my niece. I would recommend it. In that game, there was no need to hide information, but there was a big map on the table, a 7th continent-like map. And I frequently wanted to show a close-up of the card where our most recent card. Sometimes that was in the center of the table, then it's easy, I can just zoom in. But sometimes not, that made it a little harder. And I was thinking, like, in our quite a while ago, I suggested it might be nice to have a little Etch-a-Sketch like physical device that would sort of come in on the top and the front, and then I could just put it somewhere and hide what else. But then I realized, well, what if I wrote an OBS extension that would automatically zoom in to an area based on some indicators on the board? And so that's what I started coding, something where I can put 2 blocks on the corners of any area and then have the camera digitally, have OBS digitally crop out and zoom in to that specific area and hide stuff outside it and make it larger. So I'm about halfway done. I think maybe in another week or so we'll be able to test it out on the channel and see how it works. I'm not 100% convinced that it's not going to be more trouble than it's worth, especially when reading from a big book. To have these cubes, it might be nice to do some hand gesturing. That's a little more computationally expensive. So we'll see how it works, but I'll get it done enough for us to try. Anything else to talk about? I did play some board games with friends. We played Green Team Wins, finally, that I picked up at Gen Con. I've been posting on Twitter my quick thoughts of these board games, so if you're interested in that kind of thing, you might check the Co-op for Two Twitter account. Maybe I'll try. Normally, the only thing I post there is when we have a new video coming up. Sometimes I've been forgetting. But recently, I've been posting thoughts about board games. I really liked Green Team Wins. It might be my new go-to game for larger parties, since it plays a high player count, like up to 12 or so, and is so quick and doesn't require anyone playing to have any skills. Doesn't require them to pretend to be something or do social deduction or even be clever or witty. It's very, you just do your job. You could explain it to anyone of any age, and it results in some fun and some laughs. And then we played Ryan Lockett's new game, Now or Never, which took much too long for what it was. I thought. I posted my thoughts on Twitter. And it was cool, but I think if I were to rank the Lockett's games, that might be at the bottom. I think for that style of game, I prefer it to be quicker. All right, anything else to talk about? We are going to play a cold case mystery suspect game this week. Finally going to get back into something a little more serious. I have 2 sets that are unknown to us. One is a set called Cold Case Crackers, and one is advertised as being developed by British detectives, by real British retired detectives. I think we might do that one. I think we might try that one, and then we'll have to decide after playing the first of those whether we want to do all 4 of them, 3 or 4 of them, and then review them, or mix them up and maybe play some of each of those 2 series and then decide whether they're worth reviewing. I think one of them does make use of the internet for extra multimedia stuff, so I don't know. We'll have to see how that goes. What have you 3, Jonathan, Matt, Anna, have you guys been up to anything you want to talk about? I've got the air conditioner running and the noise reduction. Hopefully it's not too annoying. Anything else enjoyable? Anything else the channel up to? Nothing jumping to mind for me. Has anyone watched the movies I recommended last time? Jonathan does eventually seem to watch some of them, so I don't feel like I'm just making recommendations in the dark. If you're watching this video, not live, but afterwards, please do post a comment on the YouTube channel. Let me know how you're enjoying this case. that's for me one of the most enjoyable parts about playing these on YouTube is responding and hearing other people's thoughts. Jonathan always, at least usually, posts after we play a long game his thoughts, and that's some of my favorite part about these games, is just discussing them afterwards. And speaking of that, there were some comments on the Co-op for Two Guild forum on Board Game Geek. If you don't know that, in the community tab on YouTube, you'll find a link to a section of Board Game Geek where we have the Co-op for Two YouTube channel Guild. That's just a small section of the Board Game Geek forum that we just discuss and plan what videos to play next, etc. Someone posted there, Blake Fritz posted some thoughts on the play-by-mail cases being a little frustrating, and that got me thinking. Blake made two comments that I thought were appropriate. The first one, though, was something that I don't think we had kind of put together explicitly about this Sherlock Holmes Fellowship of Bones case. If you'll remember, we get brought the case by a guy named Lawson. So the person who comes into our office is John Lawson. He brings us the case. He's the secretary of this Royal Society, secretary of the Royal Society. He brings us the case, and we're told several times how nervous he is, and sweating and nervous. And we had some theories about that. Like, it was very conspicuous how nervous he was. And we didn't really put our finger on why that was. We thought maybe he was involved in some way. Maybe he's an opium addict, because that got mentioned at some point. So this person, Blake, posted on the forum. He said, boy, it's about time you went and talked to John Lawson. John Lawson is one of the three people, he tells us, when we walk through and we find this open back door, he says, well, we ask him who has the keys. He says, well, the librarian has a key, this other guy has a key, I have a key somewhere. And Blake said, I think the reason he's been so nervous right from the start is he knew about that door being open and he has lost his key. And he's worried that we're going to figure out that it's his key that led to this murder, and he's going to be in trouble for that. And I thought that was very good guess. That seems like a very plausible scenario to me, that the reason he's so nervous is because he misplaced his key and someone is using it to do stuff. Either that, or he is involved in this smuggling thing and he willingly gave his key to be used, or he's involved. So I thought that was very good. The other thing that Blake Fritz said that I think we're going to want to circle back to at some point was a bit of a critique about this play-by-mail system. My main critique so far is just how long the turnaround has been between replies. That's been a little disappointing. I really wish it could come quicker so we could get these played on a predictable day of the week. They arrived today, that's why we're playing today, and that's what we're going to try to do, play them as soon as they arrive. But Blake's critique was something that I think we've mentioned and I've talked about and I completely agree with, which is that one of the missed opportunities, at least so far here, is the idea that you could mail the player some more interesting surprise items. Like we might get the autopsy report written, mailed to us like a little packet, so that we know now every reply we've gotten so far in both games has been in the exact same format. And you can understand why that would be for economics. Remember, they have to pay to send these. Or the base price we paid was like $40, I think, and now all of these mails to us are free. But they're always in this exact format, on this exact double-sided sheet with each reply from our investigators. And it would be nice if that was more varied. Like if occasionally someone wrote back to us and said, hey, I'm enclosing the autopsy report I got, and it was like a sheaf of papers. Or maybe proactively, someone would mail you and you'd get a correspondence, not from one of your 3 investigators, but like a letter from the killer or the newspaper guy writing you and saying, hey, I heard you're investigating this case. I'd like to talk to you about this. Like, there is a missed opportunity there. And I do think at some point, maybe after we finish these 2 play-by-mail games, we should talk about game design issues for these play-by-mail games and how you might lean into this play-by-mail design and maybe make it a little more interesting. It is a currently untapped market, really. We've got these subscription-based mail games, which are like the Hunt-A-Killer games. Those are very popular. Those, every month or so, you get a new volume until it finishes. Like Hunt-A-Killer has a dozen or 2 dozen sets you subscribe to. Every month you get a new packet for 6 months or for 12 months, and then the case wraps up and you solve it. Play-by-mail games used to be more popular back in the day before the internet, where you would submit, and you can still do them, you can still find them. You play a game by submitting your turn by mail, or now you could do it on the internet and then wait for a mail reply. But this does offer a different thematic feel, and there's some clever things that were done. This 3 investigator thing is very clever. But I think maybe there's an opportunity somewhere between the subscription-based once-a-month package arriving and this, which is the letter comes back in the mail, some middle ground where it's maybe a little more unpredictable what information would get, what stuff would get sent to you and when, to make you keep the suspense a little higher, keep that dopamine unpredictable system triggered. Last point on that I'll say is that I've got this set of slides for a talk, for a video I want to make on the counterpoint to the remedial detective school video I did. So I did a video on how to be a good detective when you're playing these games, and then I've got a set of slides prepared for a video on designing these games, the design choices. And one of the dilemmas as a designer of the Sherlock Holmes cases is how to make the decisions feel important, feel weighty. When you're playing Sherlock Holmes, if there's no time limit, then basically you can go wherever you want. It doesn't really matter the order you go places. And so if you want to we try to role play it a little bit, and our strategy as well, witnesses would forget. Like, we add things to the game that aren't really there to make it more interesting to decide where to go. And then the cases that have time limits, that's motivating you to make efficient decisions. This game has a couple mechanisms that are making our decisions feel more weighty and important. And I think it pays to revisit that at some point, but let's just go over quickly since we've got time. We haven't played this in a while. The one thing that makes our decisions feel weighty here is that the game promises us in its instructions that this is not all a preset thing, and that the actual killer might be responding to our actions. So if you look at the instructions here, it says, always remember the killer is actively trying to thwart your investigation. Your choices can affect outcomes for characters surrounding the case with legal, romantic, or even mortal consequences. All right, we've seen no sign of that actually being true, but we're assuming it's just because that hasn't happened yet, or at least that's the promise. So that's one reason why we are more imbued with some concern over making efficient decisions. Another very clever thing that hadn't occurred to me for this kind of game that really works remarkably well at making us chew over our decisions is this idea that we have 3 different detectives with different specialties, and the idea that who we choose to send where will affect what information comes back. It definitely affects how it's told to us, because each of our 3 investigators comes back, explains what they saw and what the conversations they had in their own style of voice. But then if you send the right person to the right place, they come back with a little bit of extra information. It's very clever, and it makes it maybe one of the key, if not the key thing so far in terms of our decisions. Like, let's send this person here, or we've got 2 places that would be good for this person, so maybe we delay going there. It's actually quite fun to make that decision. There's a third way that the decisions are more weighty with this game, which is just the fact that it takes a week to get the reply. Suddenly, you have to think a little harder about doing something useless. You're like, well, let's just, if you're playing Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, you're like, well, let's just go here, clean that up. It's 99% unlikely to have anything there. There's probably no one at that location. It's probably not even in the book. When you're playing Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, you basically just say, well, let's just do that first because it's probably not there. Here you have to sit and say, wait a second, that's one of our 3 things that we can do, and we have to wait 10 days to get a reply. Let's not go someplace that we think is not going to be useful. And that actually works to make us think harder about our decisions. And I think that's an interesting thing. Matt says, is there a limit to how many turns you can take? Without something like that, it seems hard to know when to make your guess rather than just keep going. It is true. To remind you, the envelope for the solution, even though you use the website to do most of the submissions here, for some reason, it's not quite clear, there actually is an envelope here. Rather than going to the website and saying, I'm ready to solve it, you actually open this up to solve it. I think that's nice, actually, although it's a little unclear to me why they didn't do it on the web. And so, but it is an interesting question about what will happen if you never solve it. Like, what if we just, you can only go to every place once on the map. The game says that. You can't go back to a place, it says. So, but you can see there are hundreds of locations on this map. What would happen if you refuse to end, if you refuse to solve it? I suspect, as Matt was saying here, like that thing about the culprit is actively trying to thwart you, it wouldn't be surprising if the game designers don't have something that says after turn 30, it's going to write you and say, hey, guess what just happened? Watson and Hudson were killed by gangsters and the case is over. We might decide to try to find out just for fun. Maybe we'll refuse to solve this and keep making moves and see what happens, or maybe the game will give us a warning when that's about to happen. Not clear, but probably it has an end. Probably it will force an active end to this case at some point, but I don't know if it'll give us some foreshadowing, some clues that that's about to happen. All right, anything else to talk about before we open up the reply? Let's remind ourselves where we sent people. So at the end of our last turn, we sent Watson to John Young. John Young was the last of the people, I believe the last of the people that we know our paleontologist was getting into recent arguments about. So another member of the Royal Society of Scientists that our guy was arguing about, we don't think he's going to be a suspect, but just to tie up that, we thought we'd visit that. Then we have Wiggins going to the East India Docks. This is one of our most promising leads. This is one of the people who has a key. We went to his house. Maybe we should look at that again. And basically, the wife tells us something weird, that he never uses that key, but we know he does. We know he does pick up packages out back. So he is one of the people who has the keys to that back door where we think the suspect may have ran out from. Wife tells us a weird thing, and she says, my husband is visiting our son down at the docks, which is also suspicious because we think there may be a smuggling operation going on. So talking to the father and the son is very appealing for us. That's at the docks. And then we're going to actually talk to the guy, John Lawson, who I was talking about earlier, who actually hired us and is nervous, and he has a key. So we're finally talking to Lawson. All right. So catching up with the chat. Jonathan Warner says, I do like being able to go back and interact with characters multiple times. They could do something like after X turns, the trail gets too cold and hints start getting less useful. Interesting. That is an interesting idea. All right, so let us open our reply from today and get started. On Twitter, I also posted about a new YouTube channel I discovered that I really like, but I think I should probably do a little update Q&A chat again soon, and I'll talk about that there. I did also finish outlining the story of my New York City case number 2 in the campaign, and got some old maps from New York City to use, and we'll talk about that when we start talking about game design on a separate video. Matt says, it's also a little unclear to me how much info you need for your guess. Yeah, we don't really know. It's not just guess. We don't know how this game ends. We don't know what that envelope says at the end of the book. Does it say, here are questions to answer? Does it say, here's the solution? Did you understand it? We have no idea how the end works. All right, let's look what we've got here. So Watson went to Sir John Young. Wiggins went to the docks. And Miss Hudson visited the secretary as we expected. All right, let us read this. Sir John Young, FGS, FRS, and his wife live in a well-appointed apartment that managed to be luxurious without ostentation. The butlers showed me into the private library, chock-a-block full of rocks and books on geology. So he's a geologist, interesting. A saber-toothed tiger skull sat on the edge of his desk with its huge teeth overhanging the edge. A duck-handled cane rested against it. Sir Young is a thin, frail-looking man in his late 60s, with graying brown hair and bushy sideburns. He rose to greet me, but did so slowly and with obvious pain. Do sit down, he said. We both did so. My butler says you are here on behalf of Sherlock Holmes. This is about the murder of that Edward scoundrel, I take it. I raised my eyebrows. For someone seen arguing with him recently, you're quite cavalier in expressing your opinion of him. I loathed that blackguard, but I certainly did not kill him. May I ask why you disliked him so? When he returned from his expedition to Australia, he offered me shares in an opal mine. He was looking for investors to help develop it and promised huge returns. I think we found our investor, maybe that suit him. I invested a small fortune. If there was ever a mine, it never paid a penny, and he took all the funds and ran off to South Africa. I lost all the money I had invested. Fortunately for me, I could afford to do so. Was there no legal recourse? I asked. I tried, but I had foolishly signed a contract without consulting my barrister, Mr. Edward Goodwin. First, it absolved Edwards of all responsibility. I leaned forward in my chair. If you may permit me to say so, sir, this all could be construed as ample motive for murder. He laughed. I understand he was struck down with a fossilized brontosaurus vertebrae. Even the smallest such must weigh 20 pounds or more. I suffer from a palsy that limits my movements and inhibits the functioning of my muscles. I could no more lift that vertebrae than lift a horse. With his permission, I examined him, and I can attest that what he said is true. Sir Young is physically incapable of lifting the murder weapon. Okay, so let's look at this. So here's the other person at the Royal Society who got into arguments with him. We've now tied this in to our previous trail of the lawsuit against him for his fraudulent mines. This is the guy who sued him. So we've sort of wrapped that up. If we pursued the lawyer for a little while and we know there was a mystery client who sued him but didn't succeed in suing him, and that person would have a motive. And now we've traced it back and connected the two ends. Here's the guy, John Young, who was the person who sued him, a fellow member of the society. And we know he's running scams. But we do know also that this guy could not have lifted the murder weapon if that's how he was killed. And one interesting thing is this is the little extra information that we got from sending Watson here. If we had not sent Watson to talk to this guy, we probably would have gotten all this information, but we wouldn't have got this little extra confirmation that actually he's verified the fact that this guy really does have this physical ailment that he says he does. So here's his alibi proof. So let's make a note. I think this pretty definitively says this guy didn't do it, assuming that it really was killed by a heavy blow to the head from a brontosaurus vertebrae. So this guy sued our victim for fraud to infirm for murder weapon for a heavy, but that's his alibi. Sounds pretty good to me, unless we find out he was killed by something falling on him. All right. But again, I like the fact that because we sent Watson to talk to him, we got good confirmation. All right, we got a long reply from Wiggins now. Wiggins is the guy we sent to the East India Docks. From the East India Docks, you get a right beautiful view of Tower Bridge. You also get a proper view of the runoff from a tannery being dumped into the Thames. About the smell coming from the river, less said the better. The docks themselves are a maze of boxes and barrels with stevedores hustling all about. Stevedores are dock workers. I went down in the evening to see if I could catch Ronald Prescott and his son having their sniff of rum and chat. I found them in the harbor master's office, each with a glass in hand and an open crate on the floor between them. I think they're they're just pilfering some crates every once in a while. Remember the wife's like, oh, they've got this super expensive tea, but he didn't steal it from the docks. He just buys it from people who bring it in. Believable? Maybe not. Okay, found them in the harbor master's office, each with a glass in hand and an open crate on the floor between them. It was filled with straw packing and dead birds. Hand to God, dead birds. Don't know what that's all about. I introduced myself as friendly as you please and told them I was only interviewing people who might have access to the basement at Burlington House. Like a formality is all, I said when I first appeared. They looked at each other like men headed to the gallows, but then they relaxed a bit when I mentioned the murder. Something was peculiar in that room, right enough, but I hadn't got my finger on it yet. Yeah, they're thieving from the docks, so they're nervous about that. But when we say, oh, we're here about the murder, they're like, okay, we can relax. You're not going to catch us for robbing from the docks. So he says, oh, that was a terrible shame, that man being killed, I'll allow. Worse yet, the damned coppers won't let me in to clean up the mess. There'll be no getting that blood stain out now, you mark my words. This guy is what's his job? He's the custodian. This guy that we're talking about, Ronald Prescott. Where were you when the murder happened? I was in the office of the Society of Antiquities all afternoon, I was. Some blasted jar or urn or some damn thing got cracked in shipping. Came from Egypt. President says to me, invaluable, he says, as if I can help the way some numbskull packed a crate or stop the waves from crashing in the Mediterranean. I ain't that the way with bosses, I said, always the fault of someone lower down the ladder. Now, do you have a key to that door that locks out behind Burlington Arcade? I'll own that I had one once, but I couldn't swear that I could lay my hands on it. The jar of old keys and pencil nubs in the broom closet might be in there. You don't use that door to take deliveries? No, stairs are too steep. There's a right lovely double door round the back. That's where all the crates come in. Oh. Is this one bound for the society then? I can't think who else would want a crate of dead birds. And there again, I'd put the cat amongst the pigeons. They both got tight-lipped and narrow-eyed. I breathed in slow, thinking what I'd said, then it hit me. It smelled of cinnamon in that little room. Before they could stop me, I dug into that crate, and right enough came up with a burlap bundle of cinnamon sticks. More than I'd ever seen in one place in all my life. Ron Jr. looked like he was ready to knock me over the head, but the father leaned back in his chair and drained his rum, cool as you please, now that the jig was up. That's just a little side business we have, me and my boy. Don't hurt nobody, except maybe the tax man, and he's a friend to no one. What say we keep this between us? There's a guinea in it for you. I didn't fancy tussling with Ron Jr., so I let it go. I didn't take that guinea, though. I want that made very clear. All right, so what have we got here? They're calm about the murder. So why were there dead birds in the crate? Let me ask you in the chat how you read this. See if you can come up with your reading of why there are dead birds in the crate. So they won't let him back in to clean up. The jar or urn got cracked in shipping from Egypt. President says, as if he can control it. He says, yeah, he commiserates with him. Bosses are always blaming people. We ask about the key to that door. He says, I had one once. Couldn't swear that I could lay my hands on it. The jar of old keys and pencil nubs in the broom closet might be in there. Do we have access to the broom closet? And then we have an interesting discussion. You don't use that door to take deliveries. And he says, no. He doesn't use that door to take deliveries. There's a double door round the back. That's where the crates come in. So one of the reasons we were highly suspicious of him is because the copper who works near that alley says that this guy goes out the back all the time, and he's saying he doesn't. But now he's telling us that cop probably just got it wrong, because there's another set of doors near there that I use. So that's important. Is this true that he doesn't use this back door, but he uses a similar one? And then we catch him, he gets upset, and he's smuggling cinnamon. Okay, let's see if the chat has come up with the dead birds theory. I just read it as smuggling sticks with birds as cover. I read it as maybe to disguise the smell. Like the dead birds would smell bad. Maybe they would disguise the smell of the cinnamon. Um, but I'm not sure. He says, I assume it's bound for the society. I can't think of who else would want a crate of birds. It's true, though, but it is kind of important, maybe, because if they are going to send it to the... One of the things we don't understand, if our theory was that this guy was doing illegal smuggling out the back of the museum and that he does have a key and all that, that's one thing. But the fact that they've got this crate open here at this office, doesn't that suggest to us that for their smuggling, they don't need the museum? He's the harbor master, the son. They just don't think... This seems to suggest that they don't need to send the crates to the museum. This is an interesting criminal scheme. If you've got a criminal scheme where you're just a sender and recipient, then you have to send the smuggled goods to some place and get them there. But if you're the harbor master and you're doing smuggling, you just take the crates off the ship into the office when you smuggle. You don't deliver them to some place and then try to get access to them. So this suggests to me, either way, no matter how you read it, that maybe they didn't need to send anything to the museum. And maybe he's believable. He's calm, right? Until when he realizes we're here about the murder, he seems quite calm. They relaxed a bit when I mentioned the murder. Relaxed about murder. I don't think these people are involved in the murder after all. I think this is just a little side story. John says, the son, though, did almost hit us in the head. It's true, but only when we found his smuggling. Oh, this was a pretty cool scene. What do you make of this Egypt jar? Any relevance to our case? Let's just write this information down. Turn 7. Begins with Ronald Prescott. All right, so what are we going to write down from this thing? I'm going to write down their calm about murder. They're nervous about smuggled crate. They're smuggling cinnamon. And maybe smuggling is different from thieving. They may not be stealing cinnamon from a legitimate shipper. They're just arranged to receive cinnamon that's not declared. Right? That's quite different. There could be someone else smuggling stuff. These people are receiving undeclared cinnamon. And everyone involved may know about it. Like the shipper knows they're sending them to the harbor master. The harbor master knows that they're receiving it. It's not like anyone's being robbed of items that they expect. It's just they're undeclared. And then he says that the key might be in jar in closet, and that he never uses the locked back door. That's very interesting. Why does he say he doesn't use it? The stairs are too steep. Stairs are too steep for him to use that door. I don't remember there being steep stairs, but This makes logical sense. He's saying, I can't take crates in through that door. It's a small door with steps for deliveries. I have to take big deliveries in through a double door that you guys just didn't notice. That seems very believable to me. It's also something that he'd tell us, and we'd know. We have to know whether he's telling the truth or not, right? This would be too easy to catch him. Look at this expression from the time. We know the expression, the cat that ate the canary. Here's the original version of it. I'd put the cat amongst the pigeons. I believe him. Broom closet. I'm wondering now, did one of our other persons tell us about going to the broom closet for something? I have a faint memory. And it said the opal mines came up again. Maybe that scene was the motive, not the smuggling. You mean the opal mines came up here when we talked to this guy about robbing him from Australian opal mine? I'll just write that in here. He is defrauding people. All right, let's read our next reply and then maybe we'll think about this broom closet. Jonathan Warner says, I'm still a bit suspicious of the son. That's a good point. Like maybe we believe if we believe the father, but you can't, hold on a minute. You can't be suspicious of the son and not the father. The son does not work in this place. Oh, you're back to you're back to the theory that maybe the son has lifted the keys from the father. Interesting. But the real reason we're suspicious of the father is the cop recognizes him always getting deliveries out back. We've got no sign that the son was in this area. In fact, the son works way across town at the docks. So it would be hard for the son, who's a harbor master, to be traveling here. So if you don't think the father is involved, it now seems unlikely that the son would be the one getting deliveries in here. All the more unlikely based on his job. Like his job is the harbor. He could get the crates there. Why would he have them delivered all the way across town to the museum and then sneak into the museum where no one's going to see him, where his father works and the father wouldn't see him? No, that's not really believable. So if the father's not involved in the scheme to receive the packages, I think it's completely implausible that the son is showing up during work hours at the society, letting himself in. The father would be afraid of running into the father or other people that would be on their eye for people who don't belong. So I think either the father's involved in lying or that's not, and they're not involved, and I suspect from their reaction that they're not involved. Yeah, Anna says, we thought that the son might be the guy in the cab. Right, because we thought the son and the father might be working together. But now that we don't seem to believe that the father's involved, I think that clears the son too. All right, let's see what Hudson comes up with talking to our guy who brought us the case, John Lawson. I'm very curious about this one. Lawson's office is as much as I've come to expect, filled with old books about science. But there were also a great colorful array of dried flowers pressed in glass hanging on the walls. It brought a bit of cheer into what would otherwise be a drab room. I found him seated behind his desk with a large book of plant drawings open before him. He was either reading it very closely or on the verge of dozing off when I entered. I rapped gently on the door frame, and he startled. "Mr. Lawson?" "Oh, good evening, Miss Hudson. May I help? How may I help?" Mr. Holmes asked me to establish the whereabouts of as many people during the time of the murder as I can," I said. "Were you present that afternoon?" "I was here all day, but I was called away by our representative at the Bank of London to attend to some society business and could not attend the lecture. I believe I left at around 4:30. "And did you return that evening?" Lawson paused, as though lost in thought. I noticed his eyes had a glassy, far-away look to them. If I may say so, Mr. Holmes, at that moment he reminded me of nothing so much as my sister's husband, Ronald, when he falls to drinking. Lawson was lethargic and stupefied and almost slurred his words. Okay, now we know he's the opium addict. No, he said. "I dined at the Sheridan Club and then returned home." "And were you well acquainted with Mr. Edwards?" On a professional basis only. As an officer of the society, I'm available to all the fellows. He seemed amiable enough, but a bit insistent that I invest in his latest expedition. It sounded promising, but I had no funds to spare for another fossil hunting escapade." "Is there anything else you can think of that might be of interest?" Nothing, I'm afraid." Another pause, followed by a sharp shake of the head. May I trouble you for the time?" "I'm sorry, but I don't carry a watch. Don't you have one attached to that fine watch chain?" "I dropped it and cracked the crystal. I'm having it repaired." "It may be uncharitable of me, but it put me in a mind of my sister's husband. Whenever he fell into drinking, he'd pawn his watch and tell her he'd broken it. Mr. Lawson certainly had that same guilty look about him as Ronald used to get." Just then the church bells chimed the half-hour. "There we are, then," I said. "It's 3:30. Then if there's nothing else, I have another appointment." "Of course, thank you, Mr. Lawson. Do tell me you're not using your convalescence as an excuse to use cocaine again. I hate the effect it has on you." This feels like a little gilding of the lily, where we're getting an extra hint about this being drug-related from Miss Hudson. Maybe she doesn't even realize, but it's brought to her mind cocaine. And maybe if we didn't send Miss Hudson, she might not make this comment. And maybe the fact that you can see this whole thing about how his eyes are glassy looking, she's explaining that, interpreting that through her past of her sister's husband. And so if we sent someone else, they would have to find a different way to tell us this information. All right, so it seems like Lawson is an opium addict, I believe, is what we're being told. His eyes had a glassy, faraway look. And maybe that's where he was. I'm just going to put opium. But he was also at the Bank of London. That's pretty huge. That's a new lead for us to follow. All right. And then he tells us where he was. He gives us his alibi, the Sheridan Club, which I think is going to turn out he was not there. He was in some opium den. Lethargic and stupefied and slurring his words. He gives us a time, left at 4:30. That puts it at before the time that someone was seen leaving out the back door. We're building our timeline. Did he return? He said no. He went to the bank at 4:30, then he went and ate at the Sheridan Club, then he went home. He never came back. Okay. He said, and then he asked the time. It sounds like he wants just an excuse to go, but it is a little weird. We say, don't you ever want to touch your fine watch chain? So we see him with a watch chain, but no watch. And he says, I dropped it and cracked it. I'm having it repaired. What are we to believe from this? She thinks, it brings to her mind that her sister's husband who needs to pawn it. But we've got another connection to the watches and the pawn, is that they're being stolen. Anna says, could he be the thief stealing the pen's watches to pawn? So Anna is suggesting that maybe what he's done is he needs money. Well, he may need money because he's an opium addict, so he's spending all his money on opium. That's certainly possible. Oh, look who's come by, Blake Fritz. So we discussed your theories, Blake, but it does seem like there's another reason now that he's so nervous. He's nervous. We were told, we were hinted that the idea that his sweating might be from opium, not so much pure nervousness. Now we've got both sides where he's super nervous and anxious and fidgety and super lethargic. So it does sound like opium. But I think this is an interesting thing about the watch chain. So I guess there's a couple possibilities here. Either he has pawned his watch because he needs money, or his watch was stolen and he doesn't want to reveal that it was stolen, or he fell down while on opium and broke his watch. So we've got like three possibilities of this watch, and we haven't seen it. So it's either broken, stolen, or pawned. Those are all viable options from where I stand. So this was a big place for clues for us here. B4 Hudson with John Lawson. So what are our notes here? He left scene at 4:30 p.m. This is before, that's before the guy even goes downstairs, I believe. We'll have to check our timeline. Before, certainly before the guy out back. And then he says he never came back that evening. Where did he go? He went to Bank of London. And he claims on society business, is what he says. Society business. And then to the Sheridan Club for dinner, he claims. Right? And then he's stupefied. Opium is my theory. And then he has watch chain. No watch. He claims it broke, but it could have been pawned, or it could have been stolen by the thief that's been stealing things from men's clubs. He also says he has no funds to spare. He's got no funds to spare to invest. Although he's claiming that the investment sounds like a good idea. All right. He had a guilty look about the watch. Bank of London, Sheridan Club, left at 4:30. All right, so I've highlighted the parts that are important. There's also a description of his office with flowers. I think maybe we should probably make a note of that in case it's relevant. Office, flowers in glass, in case that comes up. Array of dried flowers pressed in glass. All right, well, we got some good clues today. Anna says, our victim was an alcoholic. He also pawned things. We suspected him before of being the thief. Is there a connection between them? We don't know that our victim was an alcoholic, do we? We know he's a drinker, not necessarily an alcoholic. Jonathan Warner says, cargo from the victim's fossil expedition was there. Could someone have hidden the case of jewelry and cash in a crate that went to the society? Jonathan says, side thought, could we check the directory for the Countess mentioned in the paper about the robbery at the train station? Station was a hybrid train station dock, so it could be feasible. That's interesting. I'm going to make a note here. Asks, can we trace the Countess in the paper? Address in directory. Let's find that. These are the kinds of things that if you don't write down, you do forget to check. So let's just look at this before we get back. So the jewel robbery was Countess Howe. Howe, Countess Howe, at Portsmouth Harbor Railway Station. Special train, Countess Howe and other guests of the Duke of Richmond. Duke of Richmond. Moved off the station pier, take passage with another boat, joining the steamer traffic. And then we're told the story of what happened, that the maid, the crane is moving stuff. The maid and the employee of the Countess Howe traveled from Chichester in charge of a dressing case, puts it on the crane, it brings it over, and it's gone when it arrives. £1,000, case contained £90 in banknotes. All right, so Jonathan is just wondering if we could maybe find her. I mean, I think it's worth looking up if Countess Howe is in the directory. Let's see if we have a Howe in the directory. We don't have to visit her right away if we can, but it would be nice to locate her so we don't forget. Well, there are two Howe. There's an A Howe and an M Howe who live very near each other. That sounds like how a countess would live. Do we have her actual first initial somewhere? Countess Howe. Well, that's very interesting. I would say that's probably a yes to Jonathan's question about can we talk to the Howes? Because we've got an A Howe at Northwest 58. And then an M how, that's going to be husband and wife have their own separate offices at Northwest 68. I guess that's not necessarily right next to each other, but pretty close. All right, so that would be a nice, interesting place to go visit. Anna says, autopsy said something like he was an alcoholic. Victim's liver shows signs of overindulgence in strong drink. Okay, I think that's fair enough. That's a fair point. If his liver is showing clear signs that he's over drinking. And it says, I think we need to go after our young man in the cab with all the blood on his trousers. Yes, that's definitely, if you'll remember, we traced the cab to Whitechapel, and then we talked to the cabbie, and he tells us exactly where he gets off. And then he tells us, remember, that it was strange that he got off here because then he kept walking east, I believe he said. So, like, it was strange to the cabbie. Like, why didn't he just have me drop him off? Why didn't he just have me drop him off where he wanted to go? Why was he walking? And then we were thinking, well, maybe he didn't want to be spotted. We were wondering if he was walking towards the dock, but he didn't seem to be. All right. The problem with that theory, Anna, with that request that we go after our man in the cab, is that I'm not sure we know where to go to look for him. We can reread that part about where he went. Let's make our note here. This is reply 6. So our question is where to go next. I did want to look and see if we can identify the broom closet. So what have we got? We don't have any broom closets marked out in our directory. Sorry, let me show you this as well while I'm looking at it. So there's the map of Burlington House. And we've been to the library where the librarian works. B4 is where we just went to with Lawson. B8 was one of the guys that got into a fight with him. There's the scene of the crime here. I believe we haven't been to the president's office or the sitting room where the guy was sitting in the beginning. But there's no way to go into the closet. And we did go to the custodian. That's the guy who told us about the broom closet. We can also go to the general address of the Burlington House. We haven't done that yet. And now Jonathan has also found that we could talk to the Countess, although it might take us a couple times to actually, it might take us 2 turns to actually find her house. But now, So Edwards was in the sitting room till 4:45. Okay, so this just to confirm that when our guy John Lawson leaves, as far as timeline goes, he leaves at 4:30. We know that victim in sitting room till 4:45. That gives him a pretty good alibi. This is the librarian we're talking to here. Here's just to remind us about the guy that we saw in the bloody cab. No more than 35, black hair, gray suit, looked nervy. Where did we drop him off? Aldgate High Street and Commercial Street. That's right here. Let's see, is it on the map? No, kind of give you a bigger view. So that's where he drops him off in the cab, and then he says, the strange thing is, he kept walking east. Don't know why he didn't just have me drop him where he was actually going. No accounting for some people. So, I don't know if we can trace that trail any further. Like, we could check here at this corner to see if someone saw him there, but that would be a bit of a long shot. I think it means to suggest that he's off the map and we can't follow him. He was injured. He had a handkerchief on the back of his neck. Muttered to himself. Jonathan says, we could go talk to the Society of Antiques president about the busted Egyptian vase to see if there was anything more to that. Anna, I think, wants to go knock on these doors at E12 to maybe see if we can't find trace of our culprit in the cab where he might have walked into one of those doors. That's certainly possible. We could go to the bank to find out about our guy Josh Lawson, or the Sheraton Club to find out if those alibis are really good. I'm still leaning. Anna says the killer sounds like Lawson, nervy, muttering in his 30s, has a key. Anathan has got John Lawson as her primary suspect now. Well, if that's true, then we could trace down his alibis. I think he's just an opium addict. To me, he reads like a red herring, that he's just an unresponsible opium addict. Blake Fritz says, was anyone else at the Sheridan Club or mentioned before? Someone else was mentioned at one of the clubs. I believe it may have been the Sheridan Club. Let's see. Who tells us that they're at their club? And was that the Sheridan Club? No, that was the Cavendish Club. Oh, no, that's the guy Cavendish. What club was he in? Let's see. Sheridan's Gentlemen's Club. Okay, so the Sheridan's Club was the club that our guy gave the alibi for being at. So that's already on our radar, the Sheridan Club. Remember, it was when we talked to one of the detectives. He says, I don't know if my guys at my club would recognize me. And then when we talked to the guy, he tells us that he was at this club for dinner. They don't remember exactly what. Just have 4:30. John Lawson leaves. Yeah, so if you'll remember, one of our suspects claims he was at a club. The police wanted to check his alibi. We haven't checked it yet. But as Blake was saying, it seems like that was probably the Sheridan Club. Well, Hold on. Nope, that's not right. The alibi for Cavendish is the Boodle Club. I think maybe the Sheridan Club was in the paper. Yes, the thefts in the paper was the Sheridan Club. Okay, good. We cleared that up. So the Boodle Club is one of our guys' alibis, and the Sheridan Club was mentioned in the newspaper of the thefts. So three pocket watches. Okay, so I think the Sheridan Club sounds like a very good place to go. Maybe now we've got two people, two reasons to want to go to the Sheridan Club. So what if we send one of our guys to the Sheridan Club? Remember, it's a gentleman's club. But Wiggins, I don't know. Do we want to send Watson or Wiggins there? If it's about thievery, Wiggins might be good, but I don't know if the gentleman's club is going to have much respect for Wiggins. So maybe Watson to the Sheridan Club. Where does our John Lawson live? Let's see what pawn store he would have gone to, or watch repair store for that matter. John Lawson, we talked to him in his office. Do we know where he lives? So I've got a Lawson spelled differently. Lawson. So if you look up Lawson in the directory, there's only one Lawson. That's a W Lawson Wall in the east. So I don't think we know our guy's address. I was just thinking maybe would we be able to find out where he pawned it? The Sheridan Club. I think we should definitely go to the Sheridan Club. Let's see. The Sheridan Club is Northwest 15. So Sheridan Club is here. Quite near our Burlington house. And if you were gonna, let's see what we've got in the directory. Do we have any watch repair place? Jewelers. Maybe a jeweler. There's a jeweler in Northwest 50. Pawnbrokers. There's no pawnbroker in the Northwest. Watchmakers. Well, there's 3 watchmakers. None in the Northwest, but might be something to keep our eye open for. All right, let's check back in the chat. Maybe, Anna says, maybe Lawson is the thief and Edwards found out and threatened him with exposure and wanted to blackmail him, but Lawson doesn't have money, so killed Edwards. I do like the idea that someone stumbled on something. Blake Fritz says, you guys said the victim couldn't be the long-term thief because he was out of the country. Yeah, my theory was that our guy, our paleontologist, was out of the country a lot, so probably couldn't be the thief. But I can see our guy stumbling onto the thief's stuff. But I feel like Lawson is a red herring. I feel like he's an opium addict and he really did leave the place at 4:30 and he went to get his opium. And so he's not involved in any of this. But I don't know, maybe you steal stuff. Let's find out. The thefts were at the Sheridan Hotel, right? So I think we should go there and see if any of our people were spotted there and how. We're not sure that our paleontologist who got murdered couldn't be the thief, but it does feel to me like he probably would have been out of town for most of it. All right, so I suggest we send Watson to the Sheridan Club. I'm just going to pencil that in here. We can change our minds. And the Sheridan Club was Northwest 15. All right, now if we do that, we still got Wiggins and Hudson. Where is our list of places? We can't very well send Wiggins to the Bank of London, but we could send Hudson to the Bank of London if we really want to track down John Lawson's stuff. We could send either of them to the pawn shop where the boomerang was pawned if we still want to go there. We could send someone to talk to any of the other offices in Burlington House. We could send someone to talk to the Countess if we think that's involved. We could send Wiggins on a wild goose chase off to the east to see if he can stumble on the trail of the person out of the cab, though my gut tells me that this is just to tell us that the place is lost. But I could be wrong. We could check one place. I wouldn't mind going to some of those other rooms in Burlington House. We heard about a Samuel Doherty who was Edward's mentor. We haven't gone there. That was Watson's reply 4. I don't remember that. Let me just take a look at this. I was on my way. We're talking to Charles Stewart, one of the guys that fought with our guy. I was on my way back to my office where I ran into Professor Samuel Doherty. He was the one who gave Edwards his start in fieldwork and mentored him through the early years. Such was my dudgeon that I berated the professor for championing Edwards. I questioned his judgment. I rather think I owe the professor an apology. We were in the hallway when all the hubbub began. That was this weird timeline where he's like, was he arguing this guy for like an hour? That's our timeline. So we could talk to Samuel Doherty. Which I've written down his address, Northwest 33. That's our victim's mentor. If we're trying to track down the victim's connections, we could go to the pawn shop that the victim used. I mean, it does make sense to retrace the steps of the victim. You guys, does Lawson have a home address? I looked up Lawson. There's a W Lawson, but not a John Lawson in the directory, so I couldn't find a way to visit him at his home. We could go to the general Burlington House address just to see what happens if we go there. Do we get new information? Do we get old info? Do we have nothing? We could try to find. We went there. We went there. We went to the librarian. Who's Dr. Joe Lister? We went to these people. Have we not yet been to Edward's address, Southwest 56? I don't think we have. So we've also got an address of a relative of our victim. Or did we? No, we did go there. Well, no, wait. That's 56 or 59? 59 we went to, but not 56. What's 59? 59 was the lawyer. So we've got an address, a relative of Edwards. I think the only reason we think that's a relative is we looked up his address. I don't think we have any other reference to any other relative. All right, what does the chat think? We got 2 more places to go. We went to Edwards' house, but this is a different Edwards. This is Edwards A. So there's 2 Edwards in the directory. There's a W. Edwards. That's our guy who got killed, Northwest 18. But there's another Edwards. It could be someone completely unrelated to our guy. Is there a reason we think he has a brother? Did the article in the paper say he has a brother? He's survived by his mother and a brother. Okay. So, yes, we do have a reason to believe that that's his brother. And there's a pawnbroker. So, I think we need to talk to his brother at some point. Was W. Lawson's address could be a relative. Anna is still interested in Lawson's address. I mean, so there's our Lawson right there. So there's just a W. Lawson. The fact that his address isn't in there makes me think, and its location, East 22, it's on the far end of the map. Although, I suppose you could say, might that be where our cab driver was going? I was going to say he's always on the east side of the map. It's not relevant. But actually, East 22. Actually, you know what? Oh, here's East 22 up here. That doesn't seem like where you'd have a cab drop you. Like, even if you were going to walk, that's a very hard place to walk through. There's a train line there. So I don't believe that this is real. If I have to guess, I guess that this Lawson is not related to ours. We have no reason to believe that Lawson has a relative. We don't have his home. We've got other leads to follow for Lawson. I don't think it makes sense to just knock on her door. And it does say what I was thinking for a moment. It's east. Here's where our guy went. It is, but look where it is. It's not like if you wanted a cab to drop you off and then you were going to walk to your home so that no one would know where you lived. You wouldn't have it drop you off here if you were going to walk here. You might have it drop you off somewhere up here, and then you secretly walk here. Here you have to walk through the train line. It doesn't make sense to me. And look, if we eventually track down and find it's Lawson, suspect Lawson, after we tracked out all his leads, then we might go knocking on doors of related Lawsons. But we can't very well just start knocking on Lawson doors without checking down these other leads. Okay, so John says Hudson to the president of Antiques or one of the house. I'm okay with sending Hudson to another room in the Burlington, the president of the Antiques place. I think John reasonable. That's reasonable. So the Society of Antiquities. Let's do that. Maybe we can find out just more information about Burlington House, more information about whether something was going on that people know about in here, the broken vase. So I'm okay with sending Miss Hudson there. But then would we send Wiggins to... I'm also okay with sending Hudson to the relative of the dead man. I think that would be reasonable too. And do you want to go to one of these pawn shops to see if we can't find out? Anna says I would definitely go to E22. You don't... Oh, E22 is the relative of Lawson? No, that... I think that's I object to that. I object to going to a lost and clue before we have run down the real lost and clues. I'm okay with sending someone to the bank. We're already sending someone to the Sheridan Club. I think when you have a murdered victim, you need to go to connections to the victim. And who would know more about what his brother was up to and who might have wanted to kill him than the brother? So I think we have to send someone to the brother. And the question is whether we send Wiggins or Hudson. Let's send Wiggins. Unless, because Wiggins can't very well go to society people, I don't think. So let's send Wiggins to the victim's brother. South, west. We might switch these up. So this is going to be Edwards A, which we think is going to be the brother or the mother. If it's the mother, it would be better for Hudson, but I believe it's going to be the brother. Could be the mother, though. If it's the mother, we might want to send Miss Hudson instead. If it's the brother, Hudson, okay, we might switch Hudson to go here once we decide where we want to send the third place. So the third place, we could send Wiggins to that location near where the cab dropped off. I wouldn't totally object to that, just because it's so close to this person that is so critical. Or we could send Wiggins to the pawn shop. I'm okay with that. So we've got a pawn shop in the paper. Is this the same pawn shop that our guy dropped his boomerang at? Where is our pawn shop where the boomerang was dropped off? Missing boomerang doesn't tell us, I guess. Didn't tell us what. And pawn shops, how many pawn shops are there and where are they? Pawnbrokers. So there's none in the Northwest, but the Southwest 76 seems to be our most likely one. It's in the paper, so it does make sense. And it's right next to the brother in his neighborhood. So I like this idea. And it's right near our victim. So okay, I think that makes sense. Our victim is here. The brother is here across the street somewhere, or nearby at least. Here, nearby. And there's the pawn shop. Here. These three locations. So Anna says the pawn shop was Bernard Strand's, that we got that information confirmed from the autopsy. Okay, perfect. Let's do that. So what we're going to do is we're just going to switch this up a bit, right? We're going to have Wiggins go to the pawn shop and Hudson go to the brother or mother. That makes sense. Relative of victim. And then we're going to have Wiggins be the person to go to the pawn shop. I like this. This is a nice This is a nice splitting of work. So Southwest 76 is the pawn shop. So Watson to the Sheridan Club, the Gentleman's Club where the thefts were, Wiggins to the pawn shop where we know the boomerang was pawned, but maybe other stuff as well, and Hudson to the relative of the victim. I like it. Everyone happy with that? This is a long section, an hour and a half. Okay. The only thing we're risking is the trail going cold from the cab. We could make a last minute change up to send Wiggins off just to hunt around where the cab left off. That's the only thing I'm having qualms about. Like, should we just hit this location where the cab left off and go to the pawn shop next? I'm sort of inclined to make a last minute change to go to E12. If we're ever going to go to E12, I don't think there's going to be anything there, but that witness is going to forget. Like, if we're going to ask if anyone saw that cab guy get off, we have to do it now before they forget. Jonathan says we could try typing the location and see if the game does that thing. All right, it feels like it's a little bit cheating, but let's make a note. Check E12. Remember how the game tells us when we try to go somewhere it doesn't expect. All right, let's try it. Let's see what happens. All right. All right, so here we are. We're ready to make our moves. So Watson is going to Northwest 15, the Sheridan Club. Wiggins, we're going to try to send him to E12, not the Lawson relative, but the place that's right next to where he said he headed in that direction. And then Hudson, we're going to send to Southwest 56, the relative. Okay, so now let's see if it complains. Okay, it sent us there. So we didn't go to the pawn shop. We went instead to E12. Just because it anticipated we would send someone there doesn't mean it's going to be a good clue. I would still likely guess that it's going to be not useful information. But we're going to put this as near east of cab drop-off, which is exactly how it was described to us. The cab stopped here, and the guy walked east. So that's our location that we think the guy might have walked past. All right, so, and let's remember to go to the pawn shop next time. Let's not forget. So we sent Wiggins there. He's green. Okay. It does make sense. Like, if this is our best lead towards our criminal, we got to go there while the trail is hot. Okay, and then we sent Watson to Northwest 15, which is the Sheridan Club. Right there. And then we sent Hudson, yellow, to the relative of Edwards, Southwest 56. Right there. All right, I feel pretty good about that. And let's make a little note for ourselves. Remember, go to pawn shop which was southwest. '76. We might want to give some more thought about other places we might want to go. I think maybe at the next session, we should take a moment to write up a list of places we want to go to choose from, because we've exhausted our previous list, and it's clear that in today's case, we didn't have a good grasp on our good options. And in fact, before I forget, I might even make a note that other places we are thinking about are Bank of London and Antiquities President. But it might behoove us to make a list of places we want to go so we don't forget anyone. All right, long session today. We're going to take a break now for 15 minutes while I reset up and we play the noir case in 15 minutes. So I got to end here. I'll see you, for those of you who are joining me for the LA noir session. I'll see you in 15 minutes. Goodbye.